Thank you very much. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. It looks long. I haven't timed it. No one's got a gig on tomorrow night, though, have they? Because we might still be here. Thank you very much to the Music Venue Trust for inviting us back. The last time I think I did the keynote speech was, I think it was in 2017, and if any of you were here, you might remember that I, at the time, was absolutely furious at the closure of my old local venue, the Harlow Square. 7 years later, of course, I still am. Unsurprisingly, because that place, that venue, I owe so much to the Harlow Square, to that amazing array of music obsessives and people who became my friends, and the artists and the utter oddballs who all passed through that venue, who taught me about life and love and music and literature and politics and self-belief. And I honestly, genuinely doubt that I'd be standing before you now if it wasn't for the Square. And I spoke a lot back in 2017 about how venues are the beating heart of our musical communities, about the inspiration and the opportunities they provide. And of course, all that is still incredibly important, possibly even more so in 2024. But today, rather than just focusing on what I feel as a music fan, as someone who's spent thousands of hours being both enlightened and entertained in grassroots venues around the country, today, really want to focus on how the grassroots music circuit has helped shape the music industry in this country. So, for those of you who don't know, before joining Radio 1 and 6 Music, I worked at the New Musical Express for 5 years. I was the news editor, and then later on I was the live reviews editor. But I joined in 1987, which at that point, alternative music had been in the doldrums for quite a long time. But everything started to change around about 1988. It certainly did for me, in one single night in Camden Town. It was a Saturday. I'd been to the old Forbidden Planet to buy some comics, had nowhere to go, so I drifted up to a venue called the Falcon in Royal College Street, and I was sat in the bar there quite early, and later on I was supposed to review the headliners, the Caretaker race, but a guy called Jeff Barrett, who some of you will know, who later went on to run Heavenly Records. Jeff was the promoter at the Falcon at the time, and he came out of that little corridor which led to the venue at the back of the pub, and he said, "Steve, you've really got to see the first band on. They're really good." And so sure enough, so I wandered in as they started, this band, and he was right. They were really, really good. It was one of those moments where music just seems to tremble on its axis. And that band was a band called the Sundays. And the Sundays, although they'd barely played a gig before, they were almost perfect. Myself and a couple of other colleagues from different music papers gave them a spectacular write-up, and here's the thing that's important. Within days, major record labels came running for them in a way that major labels hadn't come running for an independent band in years. That night, that one set they did would go on to help change the whole dialogue around independent music at that point. I can't stress this enough, what a music-changing moment their arrival was, and how it would influence what happened in the next decade. Because alongside Manchester, which was happening in the north, the Sundays raised the bar. They absolutely did. And it all happened because of that 30 minutes in a pub back room in North London. The Sundays went on to sign for the Rough Trade label, and by the dawn of 1989, they went out on a small tour around the country to accompany the release of their debut single, Can't Be Sure. Once again, I am dispatched to review the Sundays, this time in Bath. And I know this because this is the poster I nicked off the wall after the gig. There it is. Now look at this. It's the most talked about band in Britain at the time, It's rubbish, this poster, look at it. Let's all get a photocopy of the press shot, pass us the Sharpie, and then, there's a bit of gap at the top. Just put some dots along the top, that'll help. I mean, but look at it again. Just stare at that, look at it again. And when you look at it for a second time, this is absolutely brilliant. No fancy font, no glossy paper. This is everything that I love and loved about grassroots venues. It has the heat and the energy of punk rock all the way through it. It's spontaneous and it's exciting, and it has the promise of something that hasn't had all the creases ironed out. It's a work of DIY artistry, this. And it advertised a gig which was flipping brilliant. They were so good that night. We did a whole page review with a picture in the paper, and that helped propel the Sundays to the top of the indie charts and helped independent music begin its journey back to the top 40. 4 years later, I'm back at the Camden Falcon. This time, because of a tip-off of a music publisher friend of mine, I went to see a band called Elastica in the same back room, although this time so full, so packed, I can barely make out shapes on the stage. There were so many people there. By now, I'd walked out of the NME in a fit of pique, and I was running an indie record label of my own, and I left that night. There was no way, having seen them play that gig, after that 30 minutes of fizzing post-Blondie new wave excitement, there was no way that I wasn't going to try and sign that band, which we eventually did on the back of a beer mat in the Good Mixer in Camden, and went on within 18 months, I think, to have a #1 album with them, all because of another 30 minutes in a pub back room. And let's not forget, the Falcon is also where, and I've checked this, on October the 13th, 1998, in front of a crowd of 33 people, and I know this because I counted them for some reason, 33 people, most of whom were their mates from UCL where they were still studying. It was on October the 13th, 98, that I first saw and heard in that tiny room a band called Coldplay. 2 days later, having managed to get his phone number, I called their manager, Phil, and we offered them their first ever live session on Radio 1. I've now lost count, I think, of the live sets that I've witnessed in grassroots venues where artists' lives have changed over the course of 30 minutes. Really special nights. Nights which have given bands the momentum to go on to greater things, and in some cases, to then change the whole musical conversation across the media and the music industry. I've seen bands who've opened doors, changed tastes, and reinvigorated local scenes that had previously slumbered. More recently, there was a band from Bristol whose demo I'd heard one track by, and that was quite good. A band who'd been already going for 4 or 5 years. A band who would probably have split up had it not been for the Bristol venue, the Louisiana. I go along and see this band. About 4 songs in, the singer, who looks like he wants to kill everyone in the room, looks to his side as, firstly, guitarist 1 starts tuning up and faffing around. He looks to his left. Guitarist number 2 is tuning up and faffing around. And then he looks back to the audience and he says, "I fucking hate this band." And that's when I fell in love with Idols for the first time. Within 18 months again, I stood watching Fontaine's DC at the Victoria in Dalston, only their 2nd or 3rd London gig ever, mesmerised by Graham Chatton's eyes. Those eyes that have the depth, they go on for miles. The songs holding you emotionally aloft. They were brilliant that night. And weirdly, coincidentally, I'd already arranged the following day to meet a guy called Jeff Bell. Jeff, who runs Partisan Records over here, who, unbeknownst to me, had also been at the Fontaines gig. Anyway, so we meet up in the pub, and he turns to me and he says, I like the music, but now having seen them, I think I'm going to make them an offer. I said, yeah, I think you should. And he did, not obviously because of my enthusiastic dribble, but because there, in that room, they cast such a poetic spell. You could see there was something bigger there, but it took that night, those 30 minutes, to really bring it out of them, to effectively change their lives. Next summer, Fontaines DC will play these massive gigs, including headlining London's Finsbury Park, and that might not have happened. They might not now be on the cusp of filling that big Arctic monkey-shaped hole in the musical landscape, had it not been for another pub back room. And people say, and I understand why, that there is less these days riding on artists doing well at grassroots venues, that there are other routes to success. Which, I'm not going to spend valuable time now destroying that argument, partly because there's always been other routes to success. There's always been pop acts with expensive videos or a TV show. Bucks Fizz never played Bedford Esquires, to my knowledge. So I think this argument sort of misses the point, really, because whether it's MTV or it's TikTok, wherever music marketing goes, you still cannot underestimate the importance of the live space. And also, I'm sure there are debates to be had about how the promoters here, how you have to deal with an evolving and fractured musical scene while appealing to the next generation of music fans. Because there's the challenge, especially post-COVID, is bringing the next generation of gig goers with us. But one thing I will say off the back of that, one thing I'll say to the naysayers and the think piece writers, I'll give you 2 words and one small example of why grassroots music venues are absolutely still key to the contemporary music landscape. 2 words: English teacher. Back in 2022, I was putting together our Six Music show. We were doing a live outside broadcast at the Great Escape Festival in Brighton, and we had a slot for a band to come on and play live in front of an audience and live to air. So I went to see English Teacher, a place in Camden, the same place where I'd first seen the Strokes, and also, bizarrely, Super Furry Animals, the night that Alan McGee came up to me after Super Furries had played and said, "Did you get it right, Steve? They're like the Beach Boys." They are not like the Beach Boys. Alan McGee could sell you an empty pizza box, but it's a place which is steeped in finding, new artists. Anyway, so I go along, I drag my mate Tom along, and we watch these nascent pop stars and their awkward rhythms and their tricky guitar solos and their willingness to experiment. And within 5 minutes of them finishing, I'd already asked the manager if they'd like to come and play for us in Brighton because they just charmed the socks off us. 30 minutes. 150 people in a room, one potentially big break. None of this possible without a venue, a stage, and an audience that understands that sometimes rubbish gig posters are in fact the best gig posters. Last month, as you know, English Teacher went on with their debut album to win the Mercury Music Prize. In their acceptance speech, Lily Fontaine, who'd already, I'm sure some of you had seen it, had already been one of the stars of the Grassroots Select Committee hearing where she talked fulsomely about the importance of the UK grassroots circuit. In her speech, the acceptance speech at the Mercury's, Lily and the band singled out Nathan Clark and the Brudenell Social Club as being one of the reasons behind their success. Now, I think what I'm saying, and I don't want to patronise you because you know this already, but the promoters here and everyone involved, you all have the ability to really change people's lives. I mean, the audience, obviously, as I said in 2017, I think, the audience will have memories of the gigs that you put on long after you've possibly forgotten about them yourselves. But you can change lives of the artists who play those gigs. You and your hard work and the gigs you put on can help change the course of British pop music. Because it does. It really does. I've seen it. 37 years now I've spent at the coalface mining for new music since first walking into the NME office. And I've seen it time and time again ever since I saw it properly for the first time with the Sundays of the Camden Falcon. Now the Falcon, that shut about 20 years ago due to noise complaints. And last year, the crazy world of Bath Moles and its faithful audience were torn apart as Bath Moles closed its doors. And every time this happens, we lose the opportunity for another magic, life-changing moment. We lose 30 minutes in the present, but 30 minutes that could have changed or shaped the future. And of course, I know this, not every band that you book is going to play stadiums or win the Mercury Prize. Some of them can't, some of them don't want to. Some of them would rather grow up to be tax inspectors than play an arena venue. Some of them are completely and brilliantly content with touring and playing to 300 people because that's how they find their joy and get their message across. And there'll be others who burn brightly and then they'll implode. There'll be some of them, obviously the bands will fall out. Some of them will just grow up or grow tired. I do know that. But some of them will have their own lives changed by playing a grassroots venue, and in turn will go on to change thousands of other people's lives too. Coldplay, Radiohead, Oasis, Fontaines DC, Elastica, Blur, Florence and the Machine, Idols, Yard Act, English Teacher, The Sundays. If I had half an hour, I still wouldn't be able to fit in all the bands who are on the list of groups that I've seen who've helped change the course of music in this country. And it's not just about the past. What about the present? What about Fat Dog? What about Black Fondue, who's a young lad originally from Ghana, who I interviewed last night on my Six Music show, purely based on an amazing set he did on the Monday night new band night recently at the Windmill in Brixton. Now, all of them have these things in common. They all needed a place to learn. They all needed someone to believe in them or take a punt on them. They all changed their destiny at some point in the course of just 30 minutes. And every one of them, on at least one occasion, will have had a photocopied poster blue tacked to the wall on the door outside. They all started at grassroots venues, or as I know them, the biggest A&R department in Britain. So thank you to the venues, thank you to the promoters, thank you to the Music Venue Trust, and thank you for listening. Thank you very much, everybody.